The morning sun rose over the green fields of Kepler 442b like any other day. Park Ji-ho wiped the sweat from his face as he checked the wheat crops. The golden grain swayed in the gentle breeze. It would be ready for harvest in 2 weeks. Another good year, he said to himself, smiling. Ji-ho had been a soldier once, back on Earth. He knew how to fix machines and fight battles, but that was 20 years ago. Now he was a farmer on this peaceful world, far from the wars and troubles of the galaxy. He liked it that way. The comm device on his belt buzzed. It was Dr. Kim Nari from the medical center in town. Ji-ho, can you come to the hospital? We need help moving some heavy equipment, she said. On my way, he replied. Ji-ho climbed into his old hover truck and drove toward New Seoul, their small city of 50,000 people. The road was smooth and clean. Children played in the parks. Old people sat on benches, talking and laughing. It was a good life here. At the hospital, Nari was waiting for him. She was a smart woman with kind eyes who had saved many lives over the years. Everyone in the colony respected her. "Thank you for coming," she said. "The new scanner is too heavy for our regular staff." They worked together to move the medical machine. Ji-ho's strong arms and military training made the job easy. As they worked, they talked about simple things: the weather, the upcoming harvest festival, normal, peaceful things. Neither of them knew that death was coming from the stars. High above the planet, space itself began to tear open. Dark holes appeared in the black void, growing larger and larger. From these holes came ships, massive, terrible ships made of black metal and sharp edges. They moved like hungry sharks through the darkness. The Kreks had arrived. For 300 years, the Kreks' dominion had been the terror of the galaxy. They conquered every world they found. They turned proud civilizations into slaves or ash. No one had ever stopped them. No one had even slowed them down. Supreme Warlord Vextar stood on the bridge of his flagship, the Dark Fang. He was 7 feet tall with gray skin and red eyes that glowed in the dark. Scars covered his face from 100 battles. Behind him stood his officers, all as cruel and cold as their master. "Another human world," Vextar said, his voice like grinding stone. "How many does that make?" 47, my lord," replied his aide. "All destroyed or enslaved." "Good. These humans think they can hide in the outer rim. They are wrong." On the planet below, the first sign of trouble came from the orbital stations. Kepler 442b had 3 small satellites that watched for asteroids and other space dangers. They were not military stations. They had no weapons, no shields, no armor. The Kreks destroyed them in seconds. The explosions lit up the sky like falling stars. People in New Seoul stopped what they were doing and looked up. Some pointed and wondered what was happening. Others began to feel afraid. Ji-ho was still at the hospital when the emergency sirens began to wail. The sound made his blood run cold. He had not heard that sound in 20 years, but he remembered it well. It meant only one thing: war. "What's happening?" Nari asked, her face pale. Ji-ho ran to the window and looked up at the sky. In the distance, he could see bright flashes of light. Ships were burning in orbit. Big ships. "We're under attack," he said. The hospital's communication system crackled to life. Governor Lee Sun-ho's voice filled the building. He sounded scared. "All citizens of Kepler 442b, this is an emergency. Unknown alien vessels have entered our system. Our orbital defenses have been destroyed. All people must go to emergency shelters immediately. I repeat, go to emergency shelters now." Nari grabbed Ji-ho's arm. "The children's ward. We have to get the sick children to safety." They ran through the hospital halls. Doctors and nurses were already moving patients. Some could walk. Others had to be carried on stretchers. The children were crying, scared by the sirens and the panic around them. Ji-ho helped carry a little girl who had been sick with fever. She looked up at him with big, frightened eyes. "Are the monsters coming?" she asked. Jiho wanted to lie to her. He wanted to say everything would be okay. But as he looked out the window and saw more explosions in the sky, he knew the truth. "Don't worry," he said instead. "I'll keep you safe." The emergency shelters were deep underground, built into the rock beneath New Seoul. They had food, water, and air for thousands of people, but they had never been used before. No one on Kepler 442b had ever faced a real attack. As people crowded into the tunnels, Jiho found himself helping to organize the evacuation. His old military training kicked in. He helped the elderly and injured. He calmed frightened children. He worked with the local police to keep order. Above them, the Krex fleet moved into attack position. 47 massive warships surrounded the planet like a cage. Their weapons were pointed down at the cities and farms below. From his command, "Ship!" Vextar sent a message to the planet. His voice boomed from every speaker in New Seoul. "Humans of this world, I am Supreme Warlord Vextar of the Krex Dominion. Your pathetic defenses are gone. Your world is now mine. You have 72 hours to surrender completely. Lay down all weapons, gather in your cities, prepare for slavery. If you resist, if you try to fight, if you try to run, we will turn this planet into burning glass. You have been warned." In the underground shelter, thousands of people heard this message. Many began to cry. Others prayed to whatever gods they believed in. Some just sat in silence, too shocked to move. Jiho found Nari in the medical section of the shelter. She was checking on the children they had brought from the hospital. "What do we do now?" she asked. Jiho looked around at all the frightened faces, old people, young families, children who should have been playing in the sun, all of them trapped underground, waiting to die or become slaves. He walked to the shelter's communication center. The radio operator, a young man named Kim Byung, looked up at him. "Can you send a message to Earth?" Jiho asked. "Earth is 6 months away, even for the fastest ships," Byung replied. "The main fleet won't get here in time. What about other human colonies? Anyone closer?" Byung checked his equipment. "I can try, but most human worlds are too far away or too small to help." "Try anyway," Jiho said. "Send out a distress call on all frequencies. Tell them what's happening here. Tell them we need help." As Byung began sending the message into space, Jiho looked around the shelter one more time. 50,000 people, all depending on a miracle. High above, the Krex fleet waited like vultures. Their weapons were ready, their troops were prepared for invasion. They had done this many times before, but something was different this time. Deep in the darkness between the stars, something was listening to Jiho's desperate call for help. Something was already moving toward Kepler 442b. Something the Krex had never faced before. The countdown had begun. 72 hours until surrender, or death. But for the first time in 300 years, the Krex were about to learn what it meant to face the fury of humanity. 60 hours remained until the Krex deadline. In the underground shelters of New Seoul, people tried to stay calm. Some played cards, others told stories to frightened children. But everyone was listening for sounds from above. Park Jiho walked through the shelter tunnels, checking on people. The old military officer in him would not rest. Even here, trapped underground, he felt responsible for these people. Dr. Kim Nari was in the medical section, taking care of a baby who had gotten sick from the stress. The child's mother held her close, tears in her eyes. "Will we ever see the sky again?" the mother asked. Nari did not know what to say. She just held the woman's hand and tried to look brave. In the communication center, Kim Byung had been sending distress calls for 2 days. His voice was getting hoarse from talking. Into the radio microphone, "This is Kepler 442b calling any human vessel. We are under attack by Krex forces. 47 enemy ships in orbit. We need immediate help. Please respond." The same message, over and over. Sometimes other colonies answered, but they were all too far away. Earth's main fleet was months away. The smaller human worlds had no military ships at all. Byung was about to give up when something strange happened. A voice came through the speakers. It was cold and calm, like ice water. Kepler 402b. This is the HSS Retribution. I received your distress call. Byung nearly fell out of his chair. Retribution. What is your position? Outer system, moving to intercept. What is your situation? Krek's fleet. 47 ships including 3 dreadnoughts. They gave us 72 hours to surrender. We have maybe 60 hours left. There was a long pause. Then the voice spoke again. Understood. Tell your people to stay in their shelters. I will handle this. Wait, Byung said quickly. How many ships do you have? Another pause. 1. The communication ended. Byung stared at the radio in shock. 1 ship? Against 47 Krek's warships? He must have heard wrong, but word spread quickly through the shelter. Someone was coming to help. A human battleship called the Retribution. People began to hope again. Jiho found Byung at the radio station. Is it true? Is help really coming? 1 ship, Byung said, shaking his head. Just 1 ship against an entire Krek's fleet. Jiho felt his heart sink. 1 ship could not possibly fight 47. It would be suicide, but at least someone was trying. At least they would not die forgotten. High above the planet, the Krek's fleet waited in perfect formation. Supreme Warlord Vextar was not worried about 1 human ship. He had fought humans before. Their vessels were small and weak compared to Krek's dreadnoughts, but something bothered him. His sensors showed a ship approaching from the outer system, but it was moving strangely. It appeared and disappeared like a ghost. Sometimes his sensors could see it clearly. Other times, it seemed to vanish completely. Report, he ordered his tactical officer. Unknown human vessel, Supreme Warlord. It is using some kind of stealth technology. Our sensors cannot get a clear reading. Size and weapons. Estimated length 800 meters. Weapon signatures are strange, my lord. I have never seen readings like this. Vextar's red eyes glowed brighter. 800 meters was large for a human ship, but still much smaller than his own flagship. Nothing to worry about. Open communications, he ordered. Far from the planet, Captain Lee Taman stood on the bridge of the HSS Retribution. He was a tall man with dark eyes that held old pain. His uniform was perfectly pressed, but his hands shook slightly when he thought no one was looking. Taman had lost everything to the Kreks 5 years ago. His wife So-Young, his daughter Min-Ju, his home planet of Prosperity Station. The Kreks had come without warning, just like they were doing here. By the time help arrived, everyone was dead. After that, Taman had volunteered for the Deep Strike program. It was dangerous work, flying alone in experimental ships to hunt Krek's raiders. Most captains who took this job never came back. Taman did not care. He had nothing left to lose. The Retribution was not like other human ships. It was built for one purpose: killing Kreks. Every system was designed for maximum destruction. The weapons were new technology that Earth scientists had been working on for years. The engines could push the ship faster than anything the Kreks had ever seen. The armor was made from materials that could resist Krek's plasma fire. But most important was the crew. Every person on the Retribution had lost family to the Kreks. They all volunteered for this mission, knowing they might never go home again. Tactical Officer Choi Minho stood at his station, watching the sensor displays. He was younger than the captain, but his eyes were just as hard. The Kreks had destroyed his colony when he was still a teenager. Captain, the Krek's flagship is trying to communicate with us, he reported. Put it through, Taman said. Supreme Warlord. Vextar's ugly face appeared on the main screen. His red eyes stared at Taman with contempt. Human Captain, I am Vextar of the Krek's Dominion. Turn your ship around and leave this system. This world belongs to me now. Taemin's expression did not change. He looked at the Krex warlord like he was examining an insect. "This is Captain Lee Taemin of Earth Fleet," he said in that same cold voice. "You have 10 minutes to leave this system. This is your only warning." Vextar threw back his head and laughed. The sound was like breaking glass. "One ship? One tiny human ship? Against my entire fleet? Are you insane?" 9 minutes, 50 seconds, Taemin replied. The communication ended. On the Retribution's bridge, the crew prepared for battle. Weapons specialist Song Hana powered up the experimental plasma cannons. Chief Engineer Yoon Do-yun pushed the engines to full power. Every person on the ship knew this might be their last fight. In the Krex fleet, Vextar was no longer laughing. No human had ever spoken to him like that. No one had ever given him an ultimatum. "All ships, attack formation," he ordered. "Destroy that human vessel. Show them what happens when they challenge the Krex Dominion." The 47 Krex warships began to move. They spread out in a classic attack pattern, surrounding the lone human battleship. Their weapons powered up with an evil red glow. On Kepler 442b, some people had found ways to watch the sky from the shelter entrances. They could see the Krex ships moving like angry hornets. In the distance, almost too small to see, was a single bright dot. The Retribution. "It's so small," someone whispered. "How? Can one ship fight all of them?" asked another. Jiho watched through a periscope that showed the sky above. He had been in space battles before, during his military days. He knew what was about to happen. The lone human ship would fire a few shots, maybe damage 1 or 2 Krex vessels. Then it would be destroyed. After that, the Krex would take their anger out on the planet below. But something felt different about this. The human captain had sounded so sure of himself. So calm. Like he knew something the Krex did not. In space, the Krex fleet finished moving into position. 47 massive warships surrounded the single human battleship. The Retribution looked like a tiny fish swimming with sharks. "Fire!" ordered Vextar. The Krex fleet opened fire all at once. Hundreds of plasma beams and missile trails filled space with deadly light. It was enough firepower to destroy a small moon. But when the light faded, the Retribution was still there. Not only still there, but completely undamaged. Its shields had absorbed every shot without even flickering. For the first time in 300 years, Supreme Warlord Vextar felt something he had almost forgotten. Fear. Captain Taemin's voice came across all Krex communication channels, calm and cold as winter. "Your 10 minutes are up." The Retribution's weapons powered up with a blue-white glow that had never been seen in this part of the galaxy. On the planet below, people watched in amazement as the single human ship began to move. It did not run away. It did not try to escape. It attacked. The real battle was about to begin, and the Krex were about to learn why humans called their species the most dangerous predators in the galaxy. The HSS Retribution moved like lightning through space. Captain Lee Taemin stood calm on his bridge as his ship danced between enemy fire. The Krex had never seen anything move so fast. "Target the lead destroyer," Taemin ordered. "Full power to forward guns." Weapons specialist. Song Hana's fingers flew over her controls. The Retribution's main cannons fired with a sound like thunder. Blue-white beams of pure energy struck the Krex destroyer's hull. The alien ship exploded instantly. Pieces of burning metal scattered in all directions. The Krex crew never had time to scream. On his flagship, Supreme Warlord Vextar watched in shock. His ships were supposed to be the strongest in the galaxy. How had one human vessel destroyed a destroyer so easily? "All ships concentrate fire on that human ship," he roared. The Krex fleet obeyed. 46 warships turned all their weapons on the Retribution. The space around the human battleship filled with deadly plasma fire and explosive missiles, but the retribution was no longer where they were shooting. The ship moved in ways that seemed impossible. It twisted and spun through space like it was dancing. Every shot missed. Chief Engineer Yoon Do-hyun smiled as he watched his engines perform perfectly. He had spent 5 years building this propulsion system. The Krex ships were big and powerful, but they were also slow and clumsy. The retribution could run circles around them. "Captain," called Tactical Officer Choi Min-ho, "enemy cruiser moving to flank us." "Hana, quantum torpedoes. Full spread," Taemin ordered. Song Hana pressed another set of controls. 6 silver missiles launched from the retribution's hull. They were not like normal torpedoes. These weapons used technology the Krex had never seen before. The quantum torpedoes passed right through the cruiser's shields, like they were not there. They struck the ship's armor and disappeared inside. For a moment, nothing happened. Then the entire cruiser began to collapse in on itself. The quantum weapons created tiny black holes inside the ship's hull. Metal twisted and bent as gravity went crazy. In seconds, the massive warship was crushed into a ball of scrap metal. The Krex crews on other ships started to panic. 2 of their vessels had been destroyed in minutes. The human ship seemed unstoppable. But Vextar was not finished. He had been fighting for 300 years. He would not be beaten by one human captain. "Release the fighters," he commanded. From the larger Krex ships came swarms of small attack craft, hundreds of them like angry insects. They were fast and hard to hit. The pilots were crazy with battle fury, ready to die for their warlord. The fighter swarm surrounded the retribution from all sides. Their small weapons could not hurt the battleship much, but they could slow it down, make it easier for the big ships to target. On the planet below, people watched the battle through whatever windows and periscopes they could find. Park Ji-ho stood with Dr. Kim Nari at one of the shelter entrances, looking up at the sky. "The human ship is surrounded," Nari said with worry in her voice. "I know," Ji-ho replied, "but look how it moves. I have never seen anything like it." The retribution was spinning through space, firing in all directions. Its smaller guns shot down fighter after fighter. But there were so many of them. "Captain," Minho reported, "fighter swarm is limiting our movement. The big ships are getting better targeting." "Time for something special," Taemin said with a cold smile. "Do-hyun, deploy the swarm." Yoon Do-hyun's hands moved over his engineering controls. "Nano swarm deployed, Captain." From the Retribution's hull came something the Krex had never seen before. It looked like a cloud of silver dust, but it was really millions of tiny machines, each one smaller than a grain of sand, but smart enough to think and act on its own. The nano swarm spread out through space in all directions. When it reached the Krex fighters, something amazing happened. The tiny machines began eating through the fighter hulls like acid. They found the electronic systems and destroyed them from inside. One by one, the Krex fighters stopped working. Their engines died. Their weapons went silent. The pilots sat helpless in dead ships, floating in space. But the nano swarm was not finished. It kept spreading, reaching toward the bigger Krex warships. When it touched their hulls, the same thing happened. The tiny machines began eating through armor and destroying systems. "What is happening?" Vextar screamed at his officers. "Why are our ships losing power?" "Unknown, my lord," his tactical officer replied. "All systems are failing. It is like something is eating our ships from inside." On the Retribution, Song Hana was having the time of her life. With the Krex fighters destroyed, she could focus on the big ships. Her plasma cannons fired again and again. Each shot found its target. A Krex battlecruiser tried to run away. Hana's cannons cut it in half. A destroyer attempted to ram the Retribution. The human ship simply moved aside and destroyed it with a single torpedo. The nanoswarm had reached 6 more Krex ships. Their crews watched helplessly as their own vessels turned against them. Lights went out, engines stopped working, weapon systems shut down. In the underground shelters, people could hardly believe what they were seeing. The Krek's fleet that had terrified them was being destroyed by a single human ship. "How is this possible?" Kim Byung asked as he watched. "Through his radio equipment. Human technology," Jiho said with pride in his voice. "We may not be the biggest or strongest species in the galaxy, but we are the smartest." The battle had been going on for 2 hours. Of the original 47 Krek's ships, only 23 were still fighting. The others were destroyed or floating, dead in space, eaten from inside by the nanoswarm. Supreme Warlord Vexatar was learning what fear really meant. In 300 years of conquest, he had never lost a battle, never even come close to losing. Now this one human ship was destroying his entire fleet. "My lord," his communications officer called out, "we are receiving a message from the human captain." Taemin's face appeared on the main screen again. His expression had not changed. Still calm, still cold. "Supreme Warlord Vextar," he said, "you now have 5 minutes to leave this system. Take whatever ships you have left and go. If you are still here when time runs out, none of you will leave alive." Vextar's red eyes burned with rage. No one gave him ultimatums. No one told him what to do. "Kill him," he ordered. "All remaining ships ram that human vessel. I want it destroyed even if we have to sacrifice everything." The surviving Krek's ships began moving toward the Retribution at full speed. They were no longer trying to fight a normal battle. This was a suicide attack. Even if the human ship destroyed them, maybe the explosions would damage it enough to stop it. But Taemin had faced desperate enemies before. He knew what they were trying to do. "Minho, plot escape vectors for all enemy ships," he ordered. "Hana, prepare the Nova Cannon." Song Hana's eyes went wide. "Captain, the Nova Cannon has never been tested in real combat." "Then this will be a good test," Taemin replied. The Nova Cannon was the Retribution's most powerful weapon. It took almost all the ship's power to fire it, but when it worked, it could destroy multiple targets at once. The charging process took 30 seconds. During that time, the Retribution had to stay still. The Krek's ships rushed toward it like charging bulls. 20 seconds to impact, Minho reported. "Nova Cannon at 70% power," Hana called out. 15 seconds to impact. 80%. 10 seconds. 90%. 5 seconds. Full power. Nova Cannon ready. "Fire," Taemin ordered. The Nova Cannon fired with a light brighter than a star. A beam of pure energy struck the lead Krek's ship and passed right through it. The beam kept going, hitting the ship behind it, then the one behind that. The energy passed through 7 Krek's vessels in a straight line. All 7 exploded at the same time, creating a chain of fire that lit up the entire star system. The remaining Krek ships stopped their attack. Their crews stared in terror at what had just happened. 7 massive warships destroyed with a single shot. Only 12 Krek's vessels remained, including Vextar's flagship. They were scattered and afraid. Their formation was broken. Their will to fight was gone. Supreme Warlord Vexatar looked around his bridge. His officers were staring at him, waiting for orders. For the first time in his life, he did not know what to do. The human ship was still there, still undamaged, still ready to fight. And his mighty fleet was almost gone. For 300 years, the Kreks had been the terror of the galaxy. Now, they were the ones who were terrified. The time limit was almost up. In 1 minute, Captain Lee Taemin would decide whether to let them live or destroy them all. Vextar had never retreated from a battle in his life, but as he looked at the burning wreckage of 35 warships, he realized he had no choice. The Retribution had won. The impossible had happened. 1 human ship had defeated an entire Krek's fleet. Supreme Warlord Vextar stared at the burning wreckage of his fleet. 35 ships destroyed, thousands of his warriors dead, all because of 1 human battleship. His tactical officer looked at him with fear in his eyes. "My lord, what are your orders?" Vextar's hands shook with rage. For 300 years, no one had defeated him. No one had even come close. Now this human captain had destroyed everything. "We retreat," he said, the words like poison in his mouth. "My lord, you heard me. All ships, jump to hyperspace. Now!" The 12 surviving Krex vessels powered up their jump drives. In flashes of dark energy, they disappeared from the Kepler 442b system. For the first time in 3 centuries, the Krex Dominion had run away from a battle. Captain Lee Taman watched them go from his bridge. He felt no joy, no satisfaction. The people of this world were safe, but his own family was still dead. Nothing could bring them back. "Captain," Tactical Officer Choi Minho said quietly, "we are receiving communications from the planet." Taman nodded. "Put them through." The main screen filled with dozens of faces. Men, women, children, all looking up at him with wonder and gratitude. In the center was an older man with kind eyes and a younger woman in a doctor's coat. "Captain." "Taman," the man said, "I am Park Ji-ho. This is Dr. Kim Nari. We cannot thank you enough. You saved all of us." "Just doing my job," Taman replied. "No," Nari said firmly. "What you did was impossible. 1 ship against an entire Krex fleet. How?" Taman was quiet for a moment. "The Krex think they are the strongest because they have the biggest ships and the most soldiers. But strength is not about size. It is about purpose." On the planet below, people were coming out of the underground shelters for the first time in 3 days. Children ran in the streets, laughing and playing. Adults hugged each other and cried tears of joy. But the celebration was just beginning. News of the impossible victory spread across the galaxy faster than light itself. The first world to hear about it was Centauri Prime. For 50 years, they had paid tribute to the Krex to avoid destruction. When they learned that someone had actually defeated a Krex fleet, people could hardly believe it. Governor Marcus Chen called an emergency meeting of his council. "Is this confirmed?" he asked his intelligence chief. "Yes, sir. Multiple sources. The HSS Retribution destroyed 35 Krex warships at Kepler 442b. The survivors retreated. 1 ship did this?" "1 ship, sir." Chen sat back in his chair, amazed. "Get me a communication line to Earth Fleet Command. If this is real, everything has changed." The news reached the Altarian Republic next. For 200 years, they had lived in fear of the Krex. Their entire military was designed around hiding from Krex patrols, not fighting them. President Sarah Kim called her generals together. "What do we know about this human battleship?" she asked. "Very little," replied General Park. "It appears to use technology we have never seen before. Some kind of nano-weapon that can destroy ships from inside." "Could we build ships like this?" "Not without human help. But if they would share their technology, contact their embassy, tell them we want to talk." On a dozen worlds across the galaxy, the same conversations were happening. Species that had bowed to Krex power for generations suddenly saw hope. If 1 human ship could defeat a Krex fleet, maybe they could fight back too. But the news had also reached the Krex homeworld. High Admiral Sectra, daughter of Supreme Warlord Vextar, listened to her father's report with growing anger. She was younger than him, but just as cruel. Her black eyes burned with hatred. "1 human ship destroyed 35 of our vessels?" she asked. "The technology was unlike anything we have faced," Vextar replied. "Some kind of nano-weapon, and their captain, he fought like he had nothing to lose." "What is his name?" "Lee Taman." Sectra memorized the name. "This cannot stand, Father. If word spreads that the Krex can be defeated, every world in the galaxy will rebel against us." "I know. But what can we do? Our ships cannot match their technology." Sectra smiled, showing sharp teeth. "Then we use our greatest weapon, the Void Reaper." Vextar's face went pale. The Void Reaper was their ultimate weapon, a ship so powerful it could destroy entire planets. It had only been used 3 times in Krek's history. "The High Council will never approve it," he said. "They will when they hear about this defeat. 1. Human captain has made us look weak. We must show the galaxy that defying the Kreks means death." Meanwhile, back at Kepler 442b, Captain Taman was dealing with a different problem. His ship needed repairs and supplies. The battle had used up most of his ammunition and strained his engines. "Captain," Chief Engineer Yoon Do-hyun reported, "we need at least a week in dock to fix everything." "We don't have a week," Taman replied. "The Kreks will send reinforcements." "Then we need help," weapons specialist Song Hana said. "Other ships, other crews." Taman shook his head. "I work alone, always have." But even as he said it, he knew things were changing. The communications officer was receiving messages from across the galaxy, offers of help, requests for alliance, pleas for protection. On the planet below, Jiho and Nari were organizing the colony's recovery. The Kreks attack had damaged several buildings and scared everyone badly, but now people were talking about the future with hope instead of fear. "The captain seems troubled," Nari observed as they watched the retribution in orbit. "He has been fighting alone for too long," Jiho replied. "But maybe that is about to change." Jiho was right. Within hours, the first alien ships began arriving in the system, not to attack, but to offer help. A medical ship from Centauri Prime brought supplies for the injured colonists. A transport from the Altarian Republic carried food and building materials. Most surprising of all was the arrival of Captain Maria Santos of the human cruiser Dawn's Light. She had been patrolling 3 systems away when she heard about the battle. "Captain Taman," she said over the communication link, "I am here to assist." "I don't need assistance," Taman replied coldly. "Maybe not, but the galaxy does. What you did here has given hope to billions of people. They need to know that humanity stands with them. This is not about politics. This is about stopping the Kreks. It is the same thing now. The Kreks rule through fear. You have shown that they can be beaten, but one ship cannot be everywhere at once." Taman was quiet for a long time. Finally, he spoke. "What are you suggesting?" "An alliance. Humans and aliens working together. Sharing technology and resources. Building a fleet that can really challenge the Kreks Empire." "And who would lead this alliance?" "The man who just did the impossible. The man who gave the galaxy hope. You, Captain." Taman looked around his bridge at his crew. Minho, Hana, and Do-hyun were all watching him. They had followed him on his lonely mission of revenge. But maybe it was time for something bigger. "I need to think about it," he said finally. But deep down, he already knew what his answer would be. The battle at Kepler 442b was just the beginning. The Kreks would come back stronger and angrier than before. When they did, humanity would need to be ready, and for the first time in 300 years, the galaxy would fight back. On the Kreks' homeworld, the Void Reaper was being prepared for launch. It was twice the size of any other Kreks ship, with weapons that could crack planets in half. High Admiral Sectra would command it personally. The war was far from over. In fact, it was just beginning. But now both sides knew the truth. The Kreks were not invincible. They could bleed. They could be beaten. And somewhere in the darkness between the stars, other species were watching and learning. The age of Kreks terror was ending. The age of rebellion had begun. 6 months had passed since the battle at Kepler 442b. The galaxy was no longer the same place. Word of Captain Lee Taman's impossible victory had spread to every world, every species, every corner of known space, on dozens of planets. Beings who had lived in fear for centuries were now building weapons and training soldiers. The Free Worlds Alliance, led by Taman and headquartered at Kepler 442b, had grown to include 50 different species. Park Jiho stood on the observation deck of the new orbital station above his homeworld. Below him, the planet looked peaceful and green. But in space around it, a mighty fleet was gathering. Human ships worked alongside Altarian cruisers and Centauri destroyers. Engineers from a dozen worlds shared their knowledge. Weapons that had never been seen before were being built in the orbital factories. "Hard to believe, isn't it?" said a voice behind him. Jiho turned to see Dr. Kim Nari approaching. She now served as the Alliance's chief medical officer, coordinating healthcare across 50 worlds. 6 months ago, we were hiding in underground. "Shelters," Jiho said. "Now we are preparing to attack the Krek's homeworld. Are you ready for this?" Nari asked. Jiho looked out at the fleet again. 150 ships from many different worlds, all united by a single purpose. It was beautiful and terrifying at the same time. "I have to be," he said. "We all do." On the bridge of the HSS Retribution, Captain Taman studied the battle plans one more time. Intelligence reports said the Kreks were preparing something called the Void Reaper, a weapon ship capable of destroying entire planets. The Alliance had to strike first at the Nexus Station. This massive space station controlled the hyperspace routes between 3 sectors of the galaxy. If they could capture it, they could cut off Krek's supply lines and force them to fight on Alliance terms. Captain, Tactical Officer Choi Minho reported. "All ships report ready for jump." "Fleet status?" Taman asked. 150 ships from 23 worlds, replied weapons specialist Song Hana. "The largest Alliance fleet in galactic history." Taman nodded. It was not just the size of the fleet that mattered. These crews had been training together for months, learning to work as one force. Human technology had been shared with alien allies. New weapons and tactics had been developed, but the Kreks had not been sitting still either. High Admiral Sectra commanded the defense of Nexus Station. From the bridge of the Void Reaper, the massive ship was twice the size of any other vessel in space, bristling with weapons that could crack moons in half. Around the station waited 200 Kreks warships, the largest fleet the Dominion had ever assembled. They had been preparing for this battle ever since her father's humiliating defeat at Kepler 442b. "Admiral," her tactical officer reported. "Enemy fleet approaching. 150 vessels." "Pathetic," Sectra said with contempt. "They think their little alliance can challenge the might of the Krek's empire. Today we will show the galaxy what happens to those who defy us." The 2 fleets met in the space around Nexus Station. For a moment they faced each other in silence, like ancient armies preparing for battle. Then Taman gave the order that changed galactic history. "All ships, attack!" The Alliance fleet moved forward in perfect formation. Human ships used their speed and advanced weapons to strike at the Krek's flanks. Altarian vessels with their powerful shields pushed through the center. Centauri fighters swarmed around the larger ships like angry insects. But the Kreks were ready this time. They had studied the battle recordings from Kepler 442b. Their ships stayed in tight formation, protecting each other. Their weapons had been upgraded to counter human technology. The battle was fierce and bloody from the first moment. Alliance ships exploded in brilliant flashes of light. Krek's vessels burned and died in the cold darkness of space. On the Retribution's bridge, Chief Engineer Yoon Do-hyun watched his damage reports with growing concern. "Captain, we are taking heavy fire. Armor down to 60%. "Stay on course," Taman ordered. "Target the Void Reaper." Song Hana fired the ship's main guns at the massive Krek's flagship. The blue energy beams struck its hull and bounced off, harmlessly. The enemy ship's armor was too thick, its shields too strong. "No effect, Captain," she reported. All around them, the battle raged on. Alliance ships fought bravely, but they were outnumbered and outgunned. Slowly, the Kreks began to push them back. On Nexus Station, Sectra watched the battle with satisfaction. The Alliance fleet was breaking apart. Soon she would unleash the Void Reaper's planet-killer weapon and end this rebellion forever. But she had forgotten something important about humans. They never gave up. "Captain," Minho called out, "we are receiving a transmission from Captain Santos." Maria Santos appeared on the screen from the bridge of the Dawn's light. Her ship was damaged. and burning, but she was still fighting. Taman, we cannot break through their formation. Too many ships, too much firepower. I know, Taman replied, but I have an idea. It will require all our ships to work together. What do you need? Trust me. Taman opened a fleet-wide communication channel. His voice reached every ship in the Alliance fleet. All vessels, this is Captain Taman. Execute Pattern Omega. I repeat, execute Pattern Omega. Pattern Omega was something they had practiced but never used in real battle. It required perfect timing and absolute trust between all the ships. The entire Alliance fleet suddenly changed. Formation. Instead of fighting as separate units, they moved like parts of a single organism. Human ships created corridors for alien vessels to attack through. Altarian shields protected damaged ships while they repaired. Centauri fighters guided Alliance torpedoes to their targets. The Krex had never seen anything like it. For 300 years, they had conquered through individual strength and fear. They did not understand cooperation, sacrifice, or fighting for something greater than yourself. What are they doing? Sectra demanded as she watched the Alliance fleet. Move in perfect harmony, unknown, Admiral. Their formation is impossible. No fleet can coordinate that precisely. But the Alliance fleet was doing exactly that. Ships from 50 different worlds, with different languages and cultures and technologies, were fighting as one. It was the power of unity against the force of tyranny. The tide of battle began to turn. Krex ships found themselves surrounded and cut off from support. Alliance vessels that should have been destroyed were rescued by their allies. The Krex formation started to break apart. All ships concentrate fire on the Void Reaper, Taman ordered. 150 ships turned their weapons on the massive Krex flagship. Energy beams and missiles filled space with deadly light. Even the Void Reaper's mighty armor could not withstand that much firepower. Explosions bloomed across the great ship's hull. Its shields flickered and failed. Atmosphere vented from dozens of holes in its armor. On the bridge, Sectra felt her ship shaking apart around her. Systems were failing. Fires burned in the corridors. Her officers looked at her with fear and desperation. Admiral, we must retreat, her tactical officer said. Never, she snarled. Arm the planet killer weapon. If we are going to die, we will take them with us. The Void Reaper's ultimate weapon began to charge. It would take 2 minutes to reach full power. When it fired, it would destroy everything. Within 1,000 kilometers, including most of the Alliance fleet. But Taman had been expecting this. He knew the Krex would never surrender, even when defeated. Do-hyun, emergency power to engines. All energy from weapons and life support. Captain, that will leave us defenseless, Yoon Do-hyun protested. Do it. The Retribution suddenly shot forward like a missile. It raced toward the Void Reaper at impossible speed, dodging the desperate fire from Krex ships. Captain, what are you doing? Hana asked. What I should have done 5 years ago, Taman replied. Ramming speed. Sir, that is suicide. Maybe. But sometimes sacrifice is the only way to win. The Retribution streaked toward the Void Reaper's bridge. At the last second, Taman opened a communication channel to his crew. It has been an honor serving with all of you. Tell the galaxy that humanity never backs down. But just before impact, something unexpected happened. The Retribution's nanoswarm, damaged in the earlier fighting, suddenly activated. Millions of tiny machines poured out of the ship's hull, surrounding both vessels. Instead of crashing into the Void Reaper, the nanoswarm ate through both ships' hulls, creating a connection between them. Taman found himself looking directly into Sectra's bridge through a hole in space. The two commanders stared at each other across the void. Human and Krex, locked in a final confrontation that would decide the fate of the galaxy. You cannot win, Sectra said, her voice filled with hatred. Even if you kill me, more will come. The Krex Empire is eternal. Maybe, Taman replied. But today it ends here. He pressed a button on his command chair. The Retribution's reactor began to overload, not to explode, but to create a controlled singularity. A tiny black hole that would tear both ships apart. But the singularity did something else, too. It created a massive electromagnetic pulse that spread out in all directions, disabling every Krek's ship in the battle area. The remaining Krek's fleet found themselves floating helpless in space. Their weapons were dead. Their engines were silent. They could only watch as Alliance ships surrounded them. The battle was over. The Free World's Alliance had won.